Anyway, I am glad to be with you all this morning. I'm looking forward to this wonderful opportunity to share this morning. And when she told me about doing this doing this preaching, I said, well, I normally do a lot of presentations, so here we go. And so I've got PowerPoints and everything else, and so if it doesn't work, then I'm not sure what I'll do. I'll do a little soft shoe or something, I'm not sure, but hopefully everything will work out great. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I know that a lot of you guys are thinking about lunch right now, even as we're talking, and you're hearing me and you're thinking, okay, how long is this going to be? Because I've got some wings or some meatballs or some lasagna or maybe a nice vegetarian dish that you're looking forward to getting to as soon as I'm done. So I figured I'd go ahead and give you an outline of what's going to happen today so you know, okay, he's almost done. So I'm going to go and talk about a few dad examples. I'm going to go over the scripture analysis, and then I'm going to do your takeaway, kind of what you're going to take home with you kind of thing. And that's going to be it, and then you'll know we're done. So I was told 15 minutes approximately is what I have. I might go a little under, I'm not sure. I hope I won't go over. But I think if I do, she's going to come tackle me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. As you guys can hear already, I have this strange accent, right? That's because I'm from far south. No, not Georgia, but a lot further south. I'm from the Caribbean, and so that's what the accent is that you're hearing. I'm going to try to speak slowly and enunciate, but you will find as you're straining, even right now, to understand what I'm saying, your brain is doing this amazing thing where it's like, okay, I think he's trying to say this, and I think that's what's happening now. I think I've got it. And that will happen throughout the rest of this morning's sermon. Your brain will be adjusting to everything, and by the end, you will look at your colleagues to your left and to your right, and you will say, I have no idea what he just said. But that's okay. We'll go ahead and get started anyway and jump in. All right. So let me go ahead and jump to the next slide. All right. So dads in my life. I'm going to start off with the last one on that list here. That's Pops. That's Mike Gatlin. That is actually Leslie's dad. I call him Pops. He has been my dad for the past few years here, and he has made me feel very welcome. He has treated me like his own, and it's been really awesome. I remember when I first went to talk to him about, marrying Leslie, and it was awesome. So we spent that first hour or so talking about, of course, the game, and then we spent a little bit of time afterwards talking about the weather, and finally it was like, so I really want to talk to you about Leslie. And he was like, yeah, okay. He already knew what I was going to do, right? So he was milking this for as long as possible. Anyway, and so I turned to him and I said, well, I just want you to know I'm not here to ask for your permission to marry Leslie. And he turns at me and he says, excuse me? I said, well, now, hold on. We both know Leslie. You can't ask permission about anything related to her. So really what I'm here for is to ask for your prayers and blessing. And he was like, oh, well, okay, that you can have. And since that day, he has been an awesome, before that really, he has an awesome part of my life. If I have surgery, if I have something going on, it's a medical condition of some kind, he's one of the first ones to call, text me to see how I'm doing. It's been really awesome having Pops in my life. Let's go to another one on that list, Papa Hamill. Papa Hamill, Richard Hamill from Pensacola, Florida. So Richard Hamill was a music minister in the Baptist church there for a number of years. He's retired now. His son, Matt Hamill, and I were roommates in college, and they adopted me when I came into America back in 1994, and they have been like my adopted folks ever since. Call him Papa Hamill, I call Mama Hamill, his wife, and they have been that for me. They have been supportive in so many ways and so much great examples of what it means to be a godly man. He is actually the first and only man that has ever kissed me on my forehead. And I remember when it happened, like it was yesterday, because he did it, and I was like, what just happened? It was just, what's going on? And he was like, I love you, son. And I was like, I love you too, but that was different. But another great example of a godly man. Finally, I want to get to my dad. He is, of course, my biological dad back in Trinidad, Gabriel Fitzroy Hyacinth. He is about 5 feet tall, which is, yes, not very tall. He's a mixture of different things, including a significant Asian heritage, and so he's 5 feet tall. My younger brother, he did not realize or get the memo, he's 6'5". So when you see all of us together, it's a rather interesting thing. But I will say this about my dad. He is the shortest guy that I will forever always look up to. My dad, from as long as I can remember, has taught me so many things about what it means to be a godly man. Not because he's perfected it, but because he's taught me about each time when you make a mistake, when you make an error, how it is to ask for forgiveness, to recognize that, and to look for change and doing something differently. He is also a pastor. And so you would think, after growing up in that household and being with him for my entire life growing up, I would know better. But I went and I married a pastor. Anyway, no, she is awesome, as you all know. And so it's been kind of a fun thing seeing this way how the life has developed over the years. And of course, I have the clownfish. You all remember Nemo, the movie? A great example of a dad, right? Traveled the ocean to try and save his son. So cool, right? And that's kind of a great thing about folks that we have in our lives that are filling the role of a father. It could be a mom, it could be a father figure, it could be someone that's in that capacity, whether it's a parent or some other loved one that fills that role. As a matter of fact, right now, if you think about it, you can probably picture in your mind a number of people that fill that role and that have filled that role over the years. And when you picture that person or persons, a number of memories come probably flooding back with that, right? When you think about that. So, let me tell you about my perspective about what it means to be a dad, right? Let's go to the next slide. This is who I think a dad is, all right? I'm thinking superhero. I'm thinking this really like a provider, a sagacious, wise person. That's my perspective, right? So in my mind's eye, that's what I thought of when I thought about being a dad. As a little kid, I've thought, I'm going to be a dad one day. I hope at least I will. And I end up being a dad. And so in my mind's eye, that's me, right? In my mind, I'm powerful. Exactly, in my mind. I'm strong. I'm fast. I'm able to leap tall buildings in a single bound or multiple bounds. And maybe not so tall. But that's me in my mind, right? But being a dad is not exactly like that, right? There are a number of aspects of being a dad that sometimes has facets of that and sometimes not so much. Being a parent, whether you're a mom or a dad, that's sometimes what the reality is. You're not the superhero, but sometimes you are, right? Sometimes you are. So I remember this story about a time in my life when I was in Lincoln Parish with my kids, right? And my youngest daughter, Angel, she was really small at the time. And we have, towards the top section, right by the lake, there's an area where the kids would play. And so there's this playground there. A number of the adults would get there, hang out, and so on, while the kids would be playing and having a good time. There's a swing set over here. There's a monkey bars and the slide and everything to the side. And then the areas where people are just running around and having a good time. Parents, smarter, in the shade, talking amongst each other and so on. And we're just doing that, and we're just laughing about this craziest thing that the kid may have done either yesterday or the day before. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Angelica, and she was just like wandering around, just wandering around, like kids will do sometimes, and just walking in her own mind, in her own world, just walking by. And I see the kids that are bigger, that are on the swings, and the swings are going back and forth, and they are doing like kids will do. I want to see how high I can go. I want to see how far I can reach, right? And here's Angelica. She's really tiny at this point. And she is walking towards the swing set and is unaware, completely oblivious of the fact that there's a kid in that swing set that's barreling towards her at speeds that she has no idea and cannot grasp. She is just walking. And I see this at the corner of my eye, and I turn, and I think everything slows down. It's like slow motion. And I run towards Angelica, and just as that swing is coming towards her little bitty head, I snatch her up just in the nick of time, and I get her out of the way. And the swing goes by. And the kid in the swing, they're like, they can't stop themselves, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to go kill a kid. But they're flying forward, and I just barely got her out of the way. And I pull her to the side, and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? You've got to be careful. You've got to be aware of your surroundings and what you're doing. Of course, Angelica, she's really small, so she's like, why are you messing with me? Has no idea what I did. And of course, I'm thinking, man, I was a great superhero right there. I did this great thing. So I figured I'd turn around, get up, and everybody around me would be like, oh my gosh. That did not happen. Nobody barely even saw anything. But in my mind's eye, this whole thing went down, right? It was just an amazing thing. So imagine my surprise now, right, when I read this story that we're about to read here in the scripture for today. So let's turn to the scriptures. All right, so we've got Proverbs 18:21 and Esther 4:12 to 17. So I'm going to read this for you all. As I read this, you will hear this accent start to suddenly sound more understandable. It's just one of those things, it's science. But your brain starts to adjust as I'm reading. I promise it will. So, check it out. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. That was from Proverbs. Let's go to Esther. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. So let's go ahead and dig into this a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. So, a little bit of background to the text, all right? Won't go into too much detail, but here's the long and short of it. The Jews have been in subjugation under the rule of the Persians. They had taken over from the Babylonians, who had also put the Jews in subjugation back in the day. This was after they had split up into different sections and so on. So they were in subjugation living under the Persians. A couple of things you should be aware of. The Persians initially, when they captured the Babylonians and had taken over the subjugation of the Jews, they were accustomed to lots of wars and lots of battles, but they had also had amassed a grand army, a grand amount of opulence, a lot of things that they had, that were things that they've gathered from different cultures and so on. Let's fast forward to at the time of Xerxes. Now, y'all have heard the name Xerxes before? Some of you guys are shaking your head. You probably remember it from the movie 300, you know? Spartacus! I mean, if you look at me, you think, man, that guy's ripped like those guys in that movie. Okay, anyway. Thank you. My wife was like, yeah, absolutely. But in that movie, right, they were fighting this 300, you remember the name of the movie, and they were fighting against this big war and so on. They ultimately lost, but they held this gap for so long against this invading army. That invading army was an army that was led by Xerxes. Xerxes had actually led a number of attacks against the Greek, and Xerxes came from a culture, a lifestyle, a particular population at the time. The Persian Empire that had grown in significance was accustomed to having a certain amount of deference to them. Xerxes was married before to a person named Queen, I think, Hyacinth, according to the scripture. Unfortunately, there was a time wherein Xerxes had ordered her to do something or say something. Well, there's a combination of things. She nevertheless said, no, I'm not going to do that. He was like, oh, really? And so he took her off the throne. Rumor has it she was beheaded. But he then decided he would have certain rules about who was going to follow his commands. He was pretty strict about things that involved the castle and things that involved his home and what you are allowed to do in terms of coming before the throne. As a matter of fact, if you came before the throne, unless you were invited, the likelihood is high that you'd be subject to death. That was the default rule. It's kind of like, if you go here and nobody's invited you, this is what's going to happen. Now, some of us probably wish that's how it was at our home, but that's another story. But that was the rule, right? So at this time period, this is what's going on, right? And when Ashanti was, for want of a better word, dethroned, he had this like year-long beauty pageant of sorts, right? And I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he did this to try and find his new wife, and of course, he was the king, so he could do that. And guess who won the beauty pageant? It was Esther, right? And so she became his queen, one of his many queens, but that's another story. And that's the story of how Esther came into the position she was in. A little background about Esther's father, Mordecai. Mordecai was Esther's first cousin. Mordecai was there when Esther's parents died. And as the first natural relative, he took in Esther and adopted her and became her dad for all intents and purposes when she was young and growing up. So that's the background. Mordecai, Esther's adopted father, has spent most of her life taking care of her before she became queen. All right? You remember, during this time, we've got the Jews that are in subjugation under the rule of the Persians. That's what's going on here. Now, a lot of you guys are probably thinking, okay, it's in the Middle East somewhere, there's the Persians. You probably have an idea about Aladdin and, the tiger and the magic lamp. And no? Anybody? Okay, never mind. Well, I actually, in reading the story of Esther, got little glimpses of things that reminded me of Aladdin. One of the things was, who was the name of the guy that was the advisor to the king in Aladdin? Anybody? Jafar, there we go. We have some folks that remembered. So Jafar was the guy that would come by, who was the king's advisor, had a big old staff. You all remember those that watched the movie? Come on, you can admit it. You watched the movie. And he was the advisor, but he was also the bad guy, right? He would make some things, he would say certain things and they would follow along. Well, one of the things that Jafar did was he was able to say things that the king would believe. Like he'd use this almost like a spell, it seemed like, right? And would be under the influence, and he would decide, yeah, that sounds great, I'm going to do that. In this particular story with Esther, there's a guy named Haman, who is the king's chief advisor. He doesn't like the Jews. He says certain things, and the king's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and he does it. And one of the things that he said was, I think you should appoint me a particular special position. And now Haman had been doing relatively okay as far as being an advisor, but he got appointed this special position. And that position involved him going around and being hailed as being like this lord, and people would bow down to him. All right? Now let's talk about Mordecai. Mordecai was someone who worked at a place called the King's Gate. The King's Gate, I thought when I used to read this story, was a place which was right, it was like you come to the gate of the kingdom, and Mordecai is like standing at the gate, and he's like, good morning, and I thought he was like a Walmart greeter. But that's not what that meant. Apparently, the King's Gate is actually a building. It's kind of like the civil service building or the Social Security building. It's a government building, and that's what it was. It was called the King's Gate, and that was where he worked. So Mordecai was in a position kind of like a civil servant. So he was an elevated position of sorts, but not exactly the bigger positions, because he was, again, one of the Jews which lived in subjugation at that time. Another thing you should be aware of is that when Mordecai was there and he had that special position, Mordecai was the kind of person, as a man of God, who felt it was wrong to bow down to another human being. So when Haman came by and everybody else at the King's Gate, that building, was saying, hey, it's Haman, let's bow down to him, Mordecai said, I'm not bowing down to this person. I'm only going to bow down to God. Well, Haman didn't really care for that. And so Haman decided in his mind that he was going to take care of not only Mordecai, but the rest of the Jews. There's some history between Haman, arguably, and his ascendant, and the Jews, which we're not going to get into now because that goes back to the Amalekites. But needless to say, there's a little bit of bad blood there, right? And so he decides, I'm going to take it out against Mordecai and the rest of the Jews. That's the background you should be aware of. Something else you should probably also be aware of. When Esther became queen, Mordecai instructed her, you might not want to tell him about you being a Jew. All right, so that is the situation. And remember, you've got this king, he's accustomed to opulence. We've got Esther, she's trying to be meek, humble, and not telling anyone a whole lot of things. We've got Mordecai, he's in this precarious position where he's got a level of influence, but also he is in subjugation, and so are the people, the other Jews. Haman plots to destroy Mordecai and the Jews. And so he has done this, and he approaches the king to get permission to do so, at least he's thinking about doing so. Mordecai gets wind of this. Mordecai goes to send a message to Esther, and he says, listen, you're in a special position. You might want to use your influence to talk to the king. Esther responds back and says, okay, but you do realize this is the rule here. If I do something like this, I could get killed. I could die. If I just go to the king and be like, hey, so I want to talk to you, and he has not invited me, I could die. Now, I remember reading this, and as a dad thinking, how could a dad put his own child in that type of harm's way? I mean, that makes no sense to me. I mean, again, superhero, right? Remember me? Dads, parents, that's what we think we are, right? So why is this happening? And I looked at it a little close, and I saw something different. Now, I will say, as far as superhero stuff goes, I don't always do that. Sometimes I'm the other person also running with the child away from the thing that's bad, and so you got to run faster. But I do try. I think most of us do try as parents as well to do that what we can for this person that we've been kind of charged with to take care of. As I read the scripture more, though, there's something else that's going on. See, Mordecai isn't telling Esther, you need to do this and put yourself in harm's way. Mordecai is doing something rather interesting. He's presenting a proposition for her to consider. You could not say anything. The Jews might or might not perish. You could choose to be silent. You could be found out, and you might perish, and the Jews might survive. Who knows? But you could be in this position for just a time as this. Is it possible that God's put you here for this purpose? But he doesn't tell her that you have to do this. Esther considers all of this, and she decides, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to do it. But I want you to do something for me, Dad. I want you to gather all of the Jews in the entire city of Susa. I want you to fast and pray for me for the next 3 days and 3 nights. And I will do the same. And then I'm going to go to the king. And if I die, I die. That was Esther's response. Huge. But also, there's something in there that's also huge. Mordecai does exactly what Esther says to him. Mordecai goes and gets all of the Jews in Susa. And they gather together and they pray and fast for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, in this story, when I've read it before, multiple times, I've always thought about how Mordecai has challenged Esther, and Esther's stepped up to the plate and said, I'm going to do this. But there's another element in here where Mordecai, as the parent, is listening to what Esther has asked of him. As parents, some of the things that we do, especially dads, not always dads, but even sometimes not parents, but even just in relationships. We sometimes hear this and have done this where we think it's our job to keep another person grounded, right? Dads, a lot of times we will do things, and I can speak for myself sometimes, but sometimes we'll be like, oh yeah, no, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Because we know the likelihood is they're going to take off, they're going to fall, there's a twisted ankle, we can see it happening, and we're trying to warn them, right? They may take that as being, well, you just don't believe in me. But we're trying to warn them, right? And so we can do that and also still say, that doesn't mean that I don't believe in you. One of the things that is important for us to learn, and we can go to the next slide here, is the importance of our ability to encourage one another, all right? And so one of the things that I've always wondered about is when we see this story involving Mordecai and Esther, Mordecai is setting an example, both in terms of the challenge, but also in terms of his response. How many of us will do something where we encourage our kids? Yeah, we do that, right? How often do we do it? Like weekly, monthly, yearly, daily, minute by minute? It's a little harder when we ask that specific, isn't it? Because we can think of times that we've done things where we'd say, you're doing a good job, if they've gotten straight A's, or B's, or C's, or a number of D's. But we still try to encourage them as much as we can, right? Hebrews 3:13 says something which I find very interesting. It says, if I can get to it here, But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. The Bible doesn't talk as much, believe it or not, about us keeping each other humble. The Bible doesn't talk as much about us keeping each other grounded. It doesn't say, listen, you don't want your friend, your son, your daughter, your spouse to get a big head, right? So you need to make sure you don't say all these good things and so on. You need to bring them down to it. The Bible doesn't say that. We have somehow gotten this perspective that that's one of the things we're supposed to do. The world already beats up on all of us, our kids, each other, on a regular basis. Do we need to be the additional person that says, we need to keep them grounded? We need to make sure they don't have a big head. The Bible says, encourage one another daily, as long as it's still called today. The emphasis is always on our ability to actually be the person that points to a person's divine purpose, not to reduce that by saying, I got to tell you, you can't do that. You can't play the saxophone, just so you know. You really can't play soccer. Now, they may not be very good, but you can't you can't do that, because when you do that, instead of you thinking you're keeping them grounded, what you've done is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Now, the Bible also doesn't say you need to tell them everything they're supposed to do. It talks about us pointing to and giving the opportunity for them to realize what direction they're supposed to take. So when Esther asked Mordecai to pray, and Mordecai does what? He prays. When you're involved in that situation, which some of you can probably think about, when that child comes to you, or maybe it is even another loved one, comes to you, and they say something to you that you weren't prepared for, you didn't have an answer ready for, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to tell this person right now. What kind of wise words can I come up with? Maybe I'll have a dad joke I can say, right? And so today is Father's Day. We have a number of dad jokes that I can say, right? I mean, there's, let's see, what do you call a deer that has no eyes? No idea? No idea? Okay, all right. What about a deer that has no legs and no eyes? Still, no idea. Still, he's not moving, no legs. Okay, all right, never mind. It's Father's Day. You got to have a couple of those. It's soccer season. So what about, what do you call a fish that likes soccer? A goldfish. It's pretty simple. I don't know. Okay, badum-ching. But still, those dad jokes that we can come up with, they're wonderful. They'll make them laugh. But sometimes we get some questions that we don't know how to answer. And when you get those questions, how you respond is telling. If you say, I'm not sure, this is what I can think of, this is what I've heard, I need to probably pray about it. When you do that and you present that situation without necessarily telling them what to do, you have helped them understand a sense of what is necessary now. And that's the fact that you as well know the importance of seeking God's guidance. And they can and should also try to figure things out in that same vein. That's something that you can do, and that's something that we are in a position where such a time as this allows us to do. So I'm going to wrap up here real quick, and I will say this. Let's see, what's the next slide? Now, maybe I'm not this guy, all right? And that's true. And for a lot of you guys, you're thinking, well, probably you should be, because, you got the dress and everything else. No, I'm just kidding. But even though I'm not this guy, and I, frankly, can't be that guy, I am grateful to be this guy. I'm grateful for the fact that each day I get to be, to have that opportunity to hopefully say or do something with one of these kids that we get the opportunity to perhaps point them and help them realize that divine purpose. So I think I stayed within 15 minutes. So thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.